What do your sneakers, a multi-billion-dollar rocket booster, and a massive industrial steam engine have in common? They are all completely useless without a material that bounces. Before the 1840s, humanity built a powerful engine of progress, but it had a fatal flaw. It was completely rigid. Iron machines shook themselves to pieces. Metal gears ground against each other until they shattered, and underwater telegraph wires short-circuited the moment they touched water. So how did a sticky jungle fluid single-handedly save the Industrial Revolution from shaking itself to pieces? To find out, we have to look at a time when smuggling a single handful of seeds out of the Amazon jungle was treated as an act of international industrial terrorism. People were enslaved, fortunes were made, and empires were built, all for a sticky, milky tree sap. But just 150 years ago, this weird, stretchy material was the most fiercely guarded resource on Earth. Sneaking a single handful of its seeds out of the Amazon jungle was treated as an act of international industrial terrorism. People were enslaved, fortunes were made, and empires were built, all for a sticky, milky tree sap. In the mid-1800s, the Industrial Revolution was booming, but it had a massive, fatal flaw. It was completely rigid. Iron machines shook themselves to pieces. Metal gears ground against each other until they shattered, and underwater telegraph wires short-circuited the moment they touched water. Humanity had built a powerful engine of progress, but it desperately needed a shock absorber. It needed something flexible, waterproof, and bouncy. The answer was hidden deep inside the treacherous, humid rainforests of Brazil. For centuries, indigenous people had known about the Hevea brasiliensis tree. When you cut its bark, it weeps a thick, milky white sap. They called it caoutchouc, or weeping wood. They discovered that if you dried this sap over a fire, it turned into a bouncy, waterproof substance. But early rubber had a catastrophic problem. It was completely unstable. In the freezing winter, it became as brittle and hard as glass, snapping instantly. In the blazing summer heat, it turned into a sticky, gooey, foul-smelling soup that melted right off your boots. It was useless for industrial machinery. And then, a desperately poor, obsessed American inventor named Charles Goodyear accidentally stumbled into a miracle. Goodyear spent years trying to stabilize rubber. He went entirely bankrupt, went to debtor's prison, and even mixed rubber with everything from ink to soup, pushing his family into deep poverty. Then, in 1839, pure chaos saved him. While arguing in a kitchen, he accidentally dropped a piece of rubber mixed with sulfur onto a blazing hot stove. He expected it to melt into a puddle. Instead, it baked. The intense heat fused the sulfur and rubber together at the molecular level, creating a material that stayed perfectly flexible in the freezing cold and completely stable in the scorching heat. He called the process vulcanization, after the Roman god of fire. Suddenly, the rubber boom exploded. Every factory, train, bicycle, and shoe company on Earth desperately demanded Brazilian rubber. Brazil instantly realized they held a global monopoly on the lifeblood of modern industry. The Amazonian city of Manaus transformed overnight from a muddy jungle outpost into the richest city in South America. Rubber barons built lavish palaces, imported French opera singers into the middle of the jungle, and paved their streets with rubber just so the carriage wheels wouldn't make noise. They guarded their rubber trees like absolute gold. Exporting a single rubber seed out of Brazil was strictly illegal and punishable by death. But Great Britain had a plan to steal the empire. In 1876, a British explorer named Henry Wickham quietly arrived in Brazil. Acting like a wealthy, eccentric botanist, he hired local tribes to help him deep in the jungle. Together, they gathered 70,000 prime rubber seeds. Wickham packed them into heavy baskets, hid them deep in the hold of a cargo ship under layers of tropical leaves, and sailed right past the suspicious Brazilian customs officers. It was one of the greatest acts of industrial espionage in human history. Wickham rushed the stolen seeds to London's Kew Gardens, where botanists successfully grew them in hotbeds. From there, the British smuggled the hardy young trees to their colonies in Malaysia and Sri Lanka, setting up massive, hyper-efficient industrial plantations. Within a few decades, Britain's organized plantations completely flooded the market with cheaper, cleaner rubber. The Brazilian monopoly collapsed in an instant. The grand palaces of Manaus were abandoned, the opera houses went silent, and the jungle slowly reclaimed the wealth. The gap between a tribal worker cutting a tree bark in a dark Amazonian jungle and a modern aerospace engineer installing synthetic rubber seals onto a multi-billion-dollar rocket booster is a massive technological chasm. One treated rubber as a curious jungle toy, the other treats it as the literal boundary between mechanical success and catastrophic failure. Both are relying on the exact same molecular stretch, so the next time you erase a mistake on paper, bounce a basketball, or take a sharp turn on a rainy highway, take a second to think about it. You aren't just using an everyday material, you are benefiting from an obsessive inventor's ruined kitchen, a daring international jungle heist, and a sticky tree sap that single-handedly absorbed the brutal shocks of the modern world.